in is then the question of how these definitions of race come to operate, and how they function. I'm interested partly in how they function, of course, in the systems of classification which are used in order to divide populations into different ethnic or racial groups, and to ascribe characteristics to these different groupings, and to assume a kind of norm of behavior or conduct about them. These, because they're that kind of person, can do that sort of things, and will believe those sorts of things, and will suffer from that set of problems, etc. Everything kind of inscribed in their species being, in their very being, because of their race. So I think what one's seeing there is a kind of essentializing of race. Yeah? The whole diverse range of characteristics are ultimately fixed or held in place because people have been categorized in a certain way racially. Now, these are very big cultural principles we're talking about, and a whole lot in terms of power and exclusion results from the system of classification. So in the lecture I want to talk about how race as a principle of classification operates to sort out the world into its superiors and inferiors along some line of biological or genetic race, and how as a consequence of that, all the conduct of society towards black people is inflected and shaped by that system of classification. I end the lecture with the phrase politics without guarantees. And what I mean by that is that, in a funny way, race itself, if you think that race is a fixed biological characteristic, and that a whole number of other things, cultural qualities, intellectual qualities, emotional and expressive qualities, follow from the fact of being genetically one race or another, if that's your image of race, you think then that the very fact of race can actually guarantee a whole range of things, including, just to name two, whether the works of art produced by a person who is biologically belongs to that race is good or not. So, if they're black, it means that they're also very expressive. It also means they'll produce a certain kind of work of art, and it'll be good because it's black. And similarly, a certain kind of politics which defends the race, tries to protect us against discrimination, etc., in which all black people will be figured as people who are, holding the correct position. And when you ask what positions do they hold, what you will respond is not the normal political argument. Well, they believe in the following things, which I think are viable and progressive things for black people to aspire for now in order to change their circumstances. You will say, well, they're like that because they think like that, because that's what black people think, and it's right that black people should. So race functions as a kind of guarantee that the work of art will be good because it's black and will be politically progressive because it's black. Now, we actually know that the world does not come out like that. Some of the works are not good, though black, made with the best of positive intentions to reverse negative stereotypes and to praise the diversity of black people. They just don't work aesthetically. And similarly, black people have a range of different political positions, conservative, reactionary, progressive, and so on, and that these fall out in a way which is not defined by their genetic or biological disposition. So I'm trying to end the notion that our politics is secure. We know it's correct by not entering the very, very difficult debate. Are we correct? What is the right strategy now? What are the tactics we ought to adopt? Who can we be in alliances with? What is the strategic thing in this moment to go for? The normal game of politics. It sort of, in a way, prevents us having to play that difficult game because we have a guarantee. We know it is because we thought it. And I think that, in a way, leads to a rather mechanistic kind of anti-racist politics. Not a thoughtful one, not a self-critical one, not a reflexive one. So by ending the guarantee, I don't mean by that, of course, that it doesn't matter that it's black people or black politics that are involved. The reason why it matters is not because of what's in our genes, it's because of what's in our history. It's because black people have been in a certain position in society, in history, over a long period of time, that those are the conditions that they're in, and that's what they're fighting against. And of course, That matters. But then black, the term black is referring to this long history of political and historical oppression. It's not referring to our genes. It's not referring to our biology. And in order to fight a politics which is effective at ending that oppression of black people, you have to ask, what is the right politics to do? You can't depend on the fact that it's blacks doing it, that this will guarantee in heaven that you're doing the right thing. So I want blacks to enter into what I think they've been rather reserved in doing, which is, the hard graft of having arguments with their own fellows, with men and women who are black, about it. And that's a more difficult thing because, in a way, you have to mobilize effectively. You can't depend on just the race to take you to your political objective. And it's not, therefore, that I have a sort of counter-politics to the existing politics of anti-racism to put into the space, but it's rather a sort of an approach to the political, yes, which I always see as not a practice which has any guarantees built into it. It's not. There is no law of history which tells you we will win, we may lose. Just as there's no law of history which will say human beings won't blow themselves to bits. They probably will. So one has to act in the notion that politics is always open. There's always the contingent of failure. And you need to be right because there is no guarantee except good practice to make it right, to mobilization, getting people on your side, committed to the right program, and so on. So I want people to take politics more seriously and to take biology a bit less seriously. I want, at what you might think a rather late stage in the game, to return to the question of what we might mean by saying. What are the implications of saying, as I've done in a rather provocative title to this lecture, that race is a discursive construct, that it's a sliding signifier. Statements of this kind have acquired a certain status in advanced critical circles these days, but it's very clear that critics and theorists don't always mean the same thing or draw the same inference from the statement when they make it. What's more, the idea that race might be described as a signifier is not one which, in my experience, has penetrated very deeply into or done very effectively the work of unhinging and dislodging what I would call common sense assumptions and everyday ways of talking about race and of making sense about race in our society today. And I'm really talking in part about that great, untidy, dirty world in which race matters outside of the academy, as well as what light we may throw on it from inside. More seriously, the dislocating effects on the world of political mobilization around issues of race and racism, the dislocating effects on the strategies of anti-racist politics and education of thinking of race as a signifier have not been adequately charted or assessed. Well, you may not be persuaded by the story yet, but that's my excuse for returning at this late date to a topic about which I know many people feel that, after all that can usefully be said about race has already been said. What do I mean by a floating signifier? Well, to put it crudely, race is one of those major concepts which organize the great classificatory systems of difference which operate in human societies. And to say that race is a discursive category recognizes that all attempts to ground this concept scientifically, to locate differences between the races on what one might call scientific, biological, or genetic grounds, have been largely shown to be untenable. We must therefore, it said, substitute a socio-historical or cultural